Hi, this is Kory Muniz, and I'm here at the end of the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles at the LAX Hilton, and I have the pleasure and privilege to be speaking with Bigtree, who is the producer of the wonderful movie, which everybody should go see, called Vaxxed. And Del, it's very good to have you here. Thank you so much.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're just such a wealth of information, and you really are so passionate about communicating with people what you've learned and your knowledge about what's going on with vaccines and with SB-277 in California.
Yeah.
There is one thing that I'd like you to touch on, and that is a new bill that is being proposed and is going through our court system and our political system called SB-18.
Yes, SB-18 is what I say is, you have to be careful when they make things sound really pretty and put a big bow on it in politics. It's not always what it's cracked up to be. So SB-18 is called the Children's Bill of Rights, which, they name it that because if you want to fight it, then they can say, why are you fighting the rights of children? But what I try to teach people to do is, is as a journalist, you're taught how to ask questions. And what I try to teach people is how to ask appropriate questions. So the question we should be asking about a law like SB-18 is, if Children's Bill of Rights, Senator Pan, who wrote it, said there's no law like this in all of the 50 states of the United States of America.
Isn't he the same person that gave us SB-277?
He is the brains behind SB-277, which took parental rights away, the right to decide what is injected into my children. So now the state of California can inject our babies with whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. That's really why I made Vaxxed. I've said that many times, that that sounds like the end of freedom, that we would take that right away from parents and hand it to the state. I mean, we had to think about it, folks. I mean, we grow up reading history of Germany and other countries. I think we can get complacent and think, oh, I live in America, it's this great country, so I like my government. My government looks out for me. Well, will that always be the case? I mean, I think this election's woken people up to the fact that you may not always get who you thought should have been elected, honestly, I thought both of the choices were fairly, were wanting. And so, what if you're not given decent choices in this country to elect a leader? Well, think about it. If you give the state power over your body or power over your children's bodies, what I said a few months ago is, there's people that think Hillary Clinton's the most dangerous human being on earth. There's people that think Donald Trump's the most dangerous person on earth. Well, one of these people was eventually going to have their hands on the syringe that you just gave them the right to inject your child with. So imagine if you somehow get a racist in office. Do you really want to have injections going into, the minority population? I'm not saying, people say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying if you've given up the right to control what's being injected into you or your children, then you don't know what's in it. Where can that lead? No good place. No good place. So when Senator Richard Pan, you have to look at him. I mean, I don't think that, I want to be clear that I think Senator Richard Pan thinks he's doing what's right for children and people. I think that he believes, you watch him in a TED Talk, and this is a guy who wants to use technology like microchips so that I'm directly connected to my doctor 24 hours a day. If I forget to take a medication, my doctor calls me, why'd you stop taking medication? I mean, imagine if they put your kids on medication, and then you decide, or you decide, hey, it's making my child act strange, I'm just going to stop the medication. All of a sudden you get a phone call from the doctor. That doesn't sound like utopia. That sounds like hell to me. But that is Senator Pan's utopia. And so in Senator Pan's utopia, as he writes more laws, the new one is SB-18. So he took away your right to decide what's being injected into your children. SB-18, I believe, it opens up to take it a step further, and that is the total destruction of parental rights. So what I was saying is, the question you have to ask yourself is, if the child needs a Bill of Rights, and Senator Pan's telling you that since the beginning of the United States of America, no one's written a law like this, You should ask yourself why, first of all.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Why do we suddenly need this thing? And why have the other 49 states thought it was a bad idea whenever they thought about it? So apparently Senator Richard Pan thinks it's a really good idea to give children's Bill of Rights. But what does that mean? What rights do they need, and what are those rights protecting them from? Or who are those rights protecting them from? That's the question we have to ask in SB-18, and I believe if you really look at it, the answer you're going to come up with is the Bill of Rights is to protect children from their own parents.
I've come to the same conclusion.
And that is, it's an anti-parenting bill. And that's really what it is. Now, we have to be careful that, sure, there are children in really terrible situations, born to parents that are using drugs, or are violent, or all of the terrible things that they try to talk about with this. This is what we're trying to stop with a law like this. But what people have to recognize is you got to be very careful about writing laws to fix some anomaly, some small, tiny contingent of the society that's aberrant from how the rest of us are acting, because writing a law to fix that in them puts a law upon all of us. What I say is that legislation is not a scalpel, it's a chainsaw. It's a very destructive way to try and deal with any issue. So you better have a very vivid and popular problem if you're going to write a law to try and fix it. We should all be relatively, 75–80% of parents or children should be in a dangerous situation before you write a law to try and fix it. If we're talking about 0.5% of kids or 1% of kids that are in a situation that might be not kind or healthy, there's certainly better ways to deal with that than to write a law that takes away all parental rights. So where does this lead to? Some people say, well, what are you worried about? Well, I'm a good parent, so why is the government? I hear this all the time. I'm a great parent, so the government's not going to bother me? Well, how do you know? There's lots of great parents that simply just were trying to spread out their vaccines, and now they can no longer do so. And people will say, well, what was the problem with that? Well, here's the problem with that. With SB 277 is, there are some really stupid vaccines. There are some that are less stupid. I think one of the dumbest vaccines there is hepatitis B, which is given to a day 1 old baby. A sexually transmitted disease they won't come in contact with till they're sexually active or sharing needles. So why are we giving it to a day 1 old baby? And we know that the stat in this country is we have more babies die on the first day of life than all the other industrialized nations combined. So clearly, in my mind, I would discontinue the hepatitis B immediately on day 1 and see if we have as many babies die in this country. But your government's not doing that. So my point being, there's absolutely no use to a hepatitis B vaccine. It doesn't protect the herd or any of the thing that the vaccination program claims it does. But now, because we've allowed this, to some people, hey, I vaccinate, I'm not worried about it, to pass a law like this, now I'm hearing more and more stories of parents that are giving birth to their children and saying, you know what, I don't want the hepatitis B right now. I'm going to wait till my child's much closer to being sexually active, and I'll decide to do it then. And the hospital are calling Child Protective Services to come in and tell them that they now need to discuss whether they're capable of parenting, simply because they don't want to give this ridiculous vaccine on the first day of life. It does no value, maybe killing babies across this country. Those are the types of things that legislation do. And so, and think about it. This mother who is now fighting to keep custody of her baby in a hospital, her mother got to walk out with her out of that hospital without needing hepatitis B. Generations for millennia have walked out of that hospital without needing a hepatitis B shot, but because Richard Pan thinks it's really important and we gave away our rights, now this mother might lose her baby simply because she doesn't think a hepatitis B shot is necessary on the first day of life. These are the things that happen. So people tell me, and what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is you're giving your rights away. And so where does SB-18 lead? What is it? What is a Children's Bill of Rights? Well, it's a Bill of Rights set out by, once again, the state. The state deciding what's best for parents. What is the standard of care we see is the languaging they use. Setting a standard of care. Well, that That's way beyond vaccines. Now this can be in every parts of our life. Is a standard of care mean diet? Could your diet, how you feed your kids, be affected by a standard of care? If the state decides that, you know, the standard diet in California is, you know, steak, chicken, or fish with potatoes, you know, starch and vegetables, and that's it. So then, does a vegetarian have to worry about, you know, Senator Pan's army showing up at the door of the police state, knocking on the door and saying, "We'd like to come in and look through your refrigerator, and because, you know, the school nurse pointed out that your child has been bringing sack lunches, and we don't see any meat products in there, and so we're concerned that your child's not being raised with a standard of care." I mean, does this is a science fiction movie. You know, and we're living into this now. So imagine vegetarian, vegan. What if you're the totally opposite? What if you are a parent that's a single mother, you're busy all the time, you're ordering a lot of pizza, you're dropping at McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken all the time? Knock, knock, knock. Hello. We understand there's a lot of fast food being eaten by your child. I mean, it affects every walk of life. You know, are we now going to have our parenting under threat, our children being threatened to take away simply because we don't meet some value that some, you know, relatively paranoid person, in my mind, Senator Richard Pan, is a man who's terrified of breathing in any molecules, any germs, this guy, I think, would vaccinate for every single microbe known to man if they could come up with a vaccine for it.
And then there's also a money trail.
And of course, you see the funding. And there's a lot of funding on SB-18 that's coming from the Silicon Valley. So now you have this guy who's getting a lot of funding from pharma combined with Silicon Valley money. And what does that mean? Well, that's now databases. That's databases watching you as a parent, monitoring you, monitoring your medical statistics. You know, when I worked on the doctors, I was like, oh, that's a great idea, having everybody's medical records on a computer where you can cross-reference. That sounds great. But then you start seeing the danger of the loss of privacy of that, and who's that being shared with? How's that information being used? And if the state decides to come in and say, oh, look at this, you know, your child was on Ritalin, but was taken off. Are we sure that they should be off of Ritalin? I mean, these are, you know, so SB-18 can lead to, if the standard of care is imagine you get a knock on the door. Hi, you know, from, well, we're Child Protective Services. What are you doing here? Well, we understand that your daughter's been having depression issues, and the nurse has recommended that she be put on an antidepressant drug. They say, well, you know, her father is dying of cancer right now, or is going through chemotherapy. It's a very tough time in our family. We'll get through it. I appreciate your concern, but I don't believe putting my children on drugs is the way to handle the situation right now. Well, I'm sorry, but the state does. The state believes that it's not right to have your child in any sort of depression state, and so we're recommending that you immediately put your child on a psychotropic drug. This could be our future if we pass a law that is this unnecessary. Because the truth is that 1% or whatever, that small percentage of children born into terrible family situations, we already have 300 rules, regulations, and laws designed to handle those problems already.
So couldn't this also be an issue with a parent that, let's say, their child's diagnosed with diabetes and they've researched that medication, they decided that they don't want their child on that medication, or they have cancer, they don't want to do the cut, burn, poison route, or even religion.
Well,
you know, the government decides that one religion is not good or sufficient enough for a child's growth, and then all of a sudden your child is taken away from that.
Right.
So the implications of this are huge.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, you're leaning into something that was a story I want to do many times on the doctors. It's very hard. Is medical kidnapping. This is something that's happening more and more where the state. This is a terrifying term, but you know, we see these stories in the paper and we just walk by them where, say, a child has cancer, the parent decides they want to take an alternative method to try and heal the cancer versus some sort of cut and burn radiation of that child, and the state steps in and takes custody of the child. They fight in court and they say, you know what, the standard of care is chemotherapy, and we're taking the child away so that they can get the chemotherapy that you're not going to give them. I mean, for people that really believe in chemotherapy, they're like, hey, yeah, okay, right on. I say this. I mean, I'm amazed we lose these court cases, but they're lost every day. You know, I would say, so you're telling me that chemotherapy works 100% of the time, that you're going to assure and guarantee my child will survive chemotherapy? Well, nothing works all the time. Oh, really? Then what gives you the right then to take my child away and force this upon them? Are you going to pay me when you kill them? Can I charge you for murder? Can I charge this doctor for murder for forcing my child into chemotherapy if it doesn't work for them? Well, we're not going to take on that responsibility. Well, you better, if you're going to take my parental rights away. These are where we need to start challenging these things.
So what can parents do?
Well, number one, don't allow laws like SB-18 to pass. I mean, I think that this election shows us, I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that you can't just let this thing run on its own. You know, you're getting worse and worse choices of candidates. The parties are deciding whatever they're going to do. And I think that if you think you can just walk through life and let the government do its thing and everything's going to be okay, you're going to find yourself in a world that you really don't want to live in very much longer. And so what do you have to do? As far as SB-18, if you live in California, you have to call your representatives. You got to call your senator. You got to call your congressman and say, "Hey, I want to drop by with my kids and my family, a couple of friends of mine. We'd love to say hi and just see what you're up to and have a discussion with you." And then you walk in that office.